What happens when you set down your sword and pick up a brush? Do you forsake the art of combat, or do you create a new art form entirely? Well, Sheo, I think the real question is, how do you measure up against not one, but both of your brothers? Is your brush really so threatening that it would outpace 2 Nailmasters at once? No, not even a little bit. Sheo is one of the easiest bosses we've fought in a while, but it's not for lack of trying. Whatever he lacks, he makes up for it with a sheer number of projectiles, with nearly all of his attacks producing a volley of paint globs that must be carefully avoided. He has the blue stroke, the red stroke, the yellow stroke, the great stroke, and the leap. The blue stroke is fairly basic, but definitely his most threatening attack in close quarters, with the combination of the first strike and the 3 blobs covering a lot of ground in front of him, and the attack coming out fairly fast. In a vacuum, dodging away as soon as you see this attack starting up and then immediately dashing back in will work pretty well, but for reasons we'll get into later, this isn't entirely reliable. Instead, because of this attack's quick startup, you'll want to spend most of this fight about a dash length away from Sheo to begin with. Then, when he uses this attack, you can dash in underneath the paint and get in some damage. I also want to point out something. More of a fun fact than a tip, but Sheo's paintbrush can be parried. Good luck landing that window, but it's kinda neat. It means that in a way, the brush is a blade. The red stroke is one of those odd attacks that looks much harder to avoid than it actually is. Here's the sweet spot right here, just on the outside of the innermost blobs. He gives you more than enough time to avoid everything as well, but if things do get tight, you can always fall back on Descending Dark. The yellow stroke is sort of the odd attack out, creating this long yellow slash which covers most of the stage instead of a series of projectiles. This is definitely the hardest single attack to dodge, because it comes out almost as fast as the blue stroke and has an incredibly large and instant hitbox. It can be avoided either by jumping or with some well-timed invincibility frames. Here's the main problem, and why I always recommend staying a dash length away from Sheo unless he's just attacked. If you're close to him and see him winding up, you basically have to assume that it's the blue slash, because if you wait until you can tell, you won't have enough time to dash away. But if you dash away preemptively, you might not have enough time to jump if it turns out to be a yellow slash, and you can't cover both bases by jumping away or else the projectiles from the blue stroke will hit you. So again, just keep a dash length away to begin with. The great stroke has the clearest telegraph of the 4, charging visibly, the same way as Oro and Mato's nail arts. The initial slash isn't particularly threatening. With so much windup, there's essentially no reason for you to be in its range when it comes out. The real threat here is the cascade of purple blobs that fall from above after he's finished. Avoiding them on their own wouldn't be an issue, but Sheo will use another attack before they've landed, and pretty much all of them can be very tricky to avoid while also paying attention to the purple rain. My advice? Don't bother. Once the purple blobs start falling, just use a Descending Dark and hide behind its invincibility frames. Finally, the leap is something I'm really glad we've almost seen the last of. Once again, this attack can either target you directly or be used just to relocate, and while you should always fall back on dashing beneath him when he jumps, there's no substitute for simply paying close attention to the arc. Now, much like his brothers, before we break down our game plan, we're going to look closely at Sheo's game plan. Sheo is a ranged fighter. He wants to keep his distance and keep you at the far end of his attacks. You may have noticed that all 3 of his grounded attacks have essentially no way of striking behind him, so if he were to let you easily slip back there, he would be extremely vulnerable. To avoid that, here's how he operates. If you're a ways away from him, Sheo will consistently spam his 4 paint attacks, one after the other after the other. If at any point he finishes one of these attacks and you are close to him, he will always try and get away from you. Usually, this will be by quickly sliding backwards, but if his back is close to a wall, he'll perform a leap instead. After he's done either the back step or the jump, he'll use another paint attack. If you didn't know all this, Sheo would seem sporadic and tough to pin down, but since we do know all of this, we can take advantage of his rigid behavior. Essentially, this will play out a bit like a turn-based battle. Sheo will attack, after evading, you'll attack, Sheo will maneuver away from you and then attack again. As long as you're close to him when he finishes attacking, you'll already know that he's not going to attack until he's either backstepped or jumped first. Once he has either backstepped or jumped, you already know he's about to attack, so essentially you've got precognition for this fight. Congratulations! Don't get too complacent, mind you. Try and keep Sheo on your screen at all times. You don't want him surprising you with an off-screen yellow stroke. The great stroke is the only real sticking point, as it can be difficult to plan around every possible action he can take, whether or not you're accounting for the influence your proximity has on his behavior. But again, you shouldn't have to worry over much about it as long as you're ready with some Descending Darks. If all that sounds like a bit much, there is very much another option. Throw on a bunch of soul-centric charms and spam ground pounds in his face. This will by no means get you through the battle scot-free, but if you're looking to just get it over with, it'll do the job. Alright, now, at the end of my script here, I've written a World of Pain joke, but I can't bring myself to say it. It's it's too terrible, even for me. That's low. Okay. Now let's take him down on Ascended. Luckily for us, there's no real big differences through here. And this is probably, apart from Oro and Motto, the first boss that we have fought here in the Hall of Gods where really nothing's changed since the first time we fought them. So, I don't have a whole lot to say here. But, with the fact that he does double damage, more sort of like damage boosting stats, or i.e. going all in and doing your best to just ignore the damage he does to you, are not really gonna cut it here. To the point that I'm dead. Alright. No big deal. Just come on straight back through again. Once again, we're just gonna go with the turn-based combat approach, making sure we give him time to dodge and attack. Every time. I actually didn't do it right there, but that's fine. Didn't pay too much of a price for it. Being too close to him just doesn't pay, and I guess I have a bit of a story about this guy. He took me a ton of time to figure out how to Radiant. That wasn't nice. And really, that just came down to the fact that this was the point where I figured out that my number one tip against Radiant bosses, that being to do your best to just ignore dealing damage and try to just dodge. That was how I best figured out, because I thought for a long time that the key to beating this guy without getting hit would just be sneaking over behind him, but that just wasn't the case. Now, of course, on Radiant, we are going to be absolutely careful as we can be. Since you're spending a lot of time in between attacks on this fight, whoops. Let's try that again. Since you're spending a lot of extra time in between attacks on this fight, I do recommend trying to get in some nail slashes to really boost the damage that you can do. Or I should say, nail arts. Oh, not good. Oh, that worked out. Never mind. As with any boss that has a lot of projectiles, Sheo here is going to be especially tough to Radiant, but since we know his AI really well by this point, he shouldn't actually be too much of an issue. All you have to do is just dash in, dash out, dash in, dash out. You know the drill by this point. We should not be here for too long. But I'm definitely thinking our Overcharm set could help out a lot here, especially with Nailmaster's Glory. There we go. Not too bad, I just had to start using some more Descending Darks. But that's gonna wrap us up here for now. And that is another Pantheon Master Blitz down. You know well who's next. The Master of the Masters, Nail Sage Sly.